All right, we got Chris Chandler here. Chris, thanks so much for coming in and being a part of our classroom.
Hey, happy to be here, Brian. Thanks for having me.
We got your Michigan State back there, a big Spartan fan from up north. So it's good stuff. Now you worked for a company, you had a steady paycheck, you had the job, you were living the life, and you decided to branch out on your own. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, I did. I spent 20 years in the corporate world, right? So I worked in some pretty big companies too. I spent about 5.5 years with General Motors. I was with Eaton Corporation for a while. I was with Kellogg's, Dr. Pepper, Snapple, right? So I worked for some really big companies, had an opportunity to do a lot of different things. And, I'd always kind of had visions of having my own company one day or doing something, even back when I was, fresh out of school. And the time was right. I'd kind of been waiting to get to the point where I thought I could do that. You had to have, I always tell people I couldn't have been as successful in my own business if I hadn't have gone through that journey in corporate America. Now that's not the story for everybody, but that was mine, right? Like I had to build credibility. I had to build that network, and that's been what's most important for my business, is just building that network and credibility and having my name out there.
So what do you do? What is your?
I'll make it as simple as possible. I am a supply chain consultant. So in simplest terms, all the things that you guys go to the store and buy every day, I'm like the guy that helps companies get that stuff there.
Right? So are you the reason that all those ships are out in the Pacific Ocean not getting to Long Beach? But
I'm not the reason they're there, but I'm the guy that helps companies fix that problem. Yes.
Okay. And so your previous work experience helps you learn logistics, and then you transfer those skills to being a consultant. So how do you pay your mortgage? Like, how do the companies pay you? What is it? How do you get paid?
It's interesting. I would tell you, I mean, for me personally, and this isn't everybody's story, but I've been more successful as a business owner than I ever probably would have been in corporate America. I fell into some really good partnerships with some of my clients. I do a lot of work in the private equity world. They pay really well, quite frankly.
Yeah.
And so it's been really good, man. I pay my mortgage just like everybody else. I have to go to work every day. My work day is maybe a little bit different than most. I may not have the strict, 8 to 5, 8 to 6, whatever it is. I have some latitude to make my own schedule now and again, which is kind of nice. That's what I was looking for when I went out on my own. But I mean, you still have demands. I mean, there's nights I might work till 10 or 11 o'clock at night some nights, or I got to be up early at 5 a.m. to go catch a flight somewhere. So, I mean, there's give and take. I would tell you, for me personally, I love having my own business. I think I prefer it at this point to being in kind of the corporate grind, as I say. But it's not for everybody, right? Some people, as you mentioned, they like that consistency. They like that steady paycheck. I look at it differently, right? So anybody that wants to think about going into business for themselves, especially in the economy that we're in, the corporate world is not as steady as it used to be. When I came out of school a long time ago, that was it. Like, you got a job. I got hired at General Motors, and when I left there, I remember my parents told me, "What are you doing? Why would you ever leave that company?" Right? But the world's changing, right? And so, I tell people all the time, if I run my own business, I can start to see the signs that things are in a downturn, or that I have to start to do something different.
Right.
There's a lot of people out there that, especially with what happened with COVID and the economy and whatever, they walked into work one day and got blindsided, didn't know they were losing their job.
Right.
So for me, that's been a real eye opener for me. That's the experience I've taken away from this.
So the 25 years and the gold watch are not what they once were, right?
They're not, man. Nobody gets pensions anymore. I think people in our generation, you and I, and even in the younger, our kids' generations, they have to be more self-sufficient. You've got to learn to be financially savvy. You got to learn to take care of yourself for the future, because I don't think anybody else is going to do it for you. It's not like our parents.
When I left Skyhawk Sports Academy and I branched out on my own to run Triumph Sports, like, I had a lot of negative Nancys. A lot of negative Nancys came out of the woodworks. When I started buying real estate as rental properties, I had a lot of negative Nancys saying that's risky and you're going to, did you have that as well? Did you feel like people are like, man, you got a guaranteed paycheck, you got a job, you got benefits, you got all this stuff, and you're going to leave it and go take this uncertain future?
Yeah. I mean, it's a risk, right? But there's no reward without risk. I would tell you, when I left my last corporate job, I did it. I mean, I'm very risk averse. I would tell you that right off the bat, which sounds funny for a guy that went off on his own.
You're an entrepreneur. You're in the middle of risk.
Right. But the way I did it, I didn't just all of a sudden wake up and go, I'm going to quit my job. I knew a year and a half before I ever left my corporate job that I was going to go do this. And I started making a plan to do that. And so I planned out every step of the way and said, I've got to get to a point where I've saved up this much money, right? I have a family to take care of, that if I'm going to be able to go through an entire year of not making a dollar,
Right.
and still be okay. I still have to pay the mortgage, right? So I made sure I'd saved up enough money to support that. I had to be able to have startup capital. I had to make sure I had the right network. I started putting feelers out a year in advance with some of the people that I worked with in corporate to say, hey, you know, I'm in confidence, just know I'm thinking about doing this, and what do you think? And I was doing a lot of bouncing ideas off of people and getting people that have done this before themselves, that were already off on their own, and maybe doing a little bit of, having them do some mentoring with me. So I think that's important too. I don't think anybody can just go off half cocked and be like, you know what, I'm just going to start my own business and here we go. It's never that easy. You got to plan ahead.
Right. And so with you as an entrepreneur, does money come in consistently? Do you have like people who have you on retainer all the time, or does it come in waves and you've got to properly plan that money, or how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, and again, I've been really lucky. I literally couldn't have planned this any better. It couldn't happen any better if I wanted it to. I fell into some really good client relationships where it has been really steady. That said, this business, what I do, it can be very lumpy, right? You might get a huge engagement and you might work, really hard for 6 months and have, a lot of money coming in, and then you might go 4 months while you're setting up the next one. If you do it right, at least the business that I'm in, you're always looking to fill that pipeline. Again, I'm lucky enough. I have a client that is I've been with them for 3 years now. They're a private equity client. They continue to plug me into companies as they buy them. And so it's this constant wave of work.
Why did they do that?
People there, right? So it's not just me. I've got a team of people that are there, so even when I'm not working, so if I tell anybody that's starting their own business, the key is there's only so many hours in your day. You have to maximize them.
Right.
And the way to scale your business is you have to find other people to do work for you. That way you make money while they're working, if that makes sense, right? I don't have to be on the clock to be making money.
Right.
If you're going to start a business and it's going to be solely reliant on you just punching the clock yourself and making whatever you're getting paid by the day, by the hour, you're probably not going to get very far. You've got to be able to scale it. You got to have other people that can do some work for you. And that way you can bring on more clients, bring on more customers, and really scale your business.
Now, Chris, why doesn't everybody do this? Why? I mean, it sounds like, logistic, supply chain, man, no offense to you. You sound like you're a great sales guy, and I know you as well. And I know you're a great guy, but why, it sounds like it's a market where there's some need there for contractors to come in and kind of fill these voids of not having to take, like, a company doesn't have to put someone on payroll to do what you're doing. They can just pay you instead. Why aren't there other people jumping into this?
I think you're going to see more of it. We're moving more and more to that gig economy. I think people are hearing that. I will tell you the number one problem that most of my clients have today is finding the right talent. There's a huge job market out there. So anybody that's coming out of school in the next probably 2, 3, 4 years, I don't think it'll be hard for most people to find a job at all. It's going to be back to when I came out of school in 1999. I just dated myself, but when I came out of school, I had multiple job offers from big companies because that's the market we were in, especially in supply chain. That was kind of on the forefront. And so I think we're getting back to that, especially with what's happening. Supply chain is at the forefront of everything.
Right.
I myself have problems finding the right talent. When I go out, I can go out and sell. The easiest thing for me to do is go sell a gig with a client. The hardest thing for me to do is then now I got to find the people that help staff that gig. So, finding the right talent. I have a client here locally that they asked me for somebody, an IT sourcing manager, to help them for about 4 to 6 months. I can't find anybody, right? I found some folks, but they come back, well, they're too high level. We don't want to pay that much. We need somebody a little lower level. Those people are all being eaten up. There are so many jobs out there right now in this market. That it is hard. And so are people jumping into this? Yes, they are. And even the people that are independent, people that are my network that I know that do this work, I call them and they're like, yeah, I just got hooked up. I got a new gig. I'm going to be tied up for the next 6 months or whatever it might be. There's definitely a war on talent. And you talked about the ports. That's the biggest issue at the ports right now from a supply chain perspective. It's not because the boats are slow. It's not because the companies overseas are being slow. They don't have enough labor at the ports to unload those things. It's kind of a perfect storm, as I tell people.
Right. That's interesting. So so what is it that you do that is so unique that puts your own small business at the forefront? Like why would a company go with you as a contractor as opposed to maybe someone else who does something similar to you?
Again, I've had the good fortune of working with some really big companies that they've done this stuff for a long time. Procurement and supply chain is integral to the automotive industry. It's integral to the food and beverage industry. And I worked for companies that did it really, really well.
Yeah.
When I started my business, my aim was I'm not going to go after the big companies. I don't want to work for the $5 billion company because they're going to look at me and go, yeah, we got it. We've already figured this out.
Yeah.
I'm working a lot in middle market, smaller companies. They don't have the internal expertise. They don't have the people on their staff that maybe have had the same experiences that I've had and haven't seen some of this stuff. And so my whole business philosophy was I'm going to take everything I learned in big business and I can take it to the middle market and make those guys more efficient. And when you take a company that is the hardest part about a big company is they move really slow. They're hard to make change at. You go to a middle market company and you take in some of the practices that the big guys do and they adopt them more quickly and they're more agile and they can move more quickly.
Yeah.
And you'd be amazed at the impact you can have on their P&L and their ROI.
Interesting. Yeah. And so jumping out on your own, when you left the last company you were with, were they surprised? Were they like, you think or were they like, hey, good for you, go make things happen, or we're going to use you? How did that work?
I would tell you the last company I was with, Brian, was in a bit of they were in a downturn. The business was not going well, which is, again, part of the reason that everything kind of came together for me. And I said, a year and a half, I kind of saw the forest for the trees and said, I've got to probably make a change. I'm either going somewhere else or I'm going to go finally do this thing I've always wanted to do.
Right.
Everything lined up. So, yeah, I mean, me parting ways with that company, it wasn't, everybody was like, hey, thanks.
Yeah.
See you on down the road. Which again speaks to what I mentioned about corporate America. I hate to sound like the Debbie Downer, right? But like my experience in corporate America was pretty good, and I had a lot of great people that I worked with, and I had a lot of good experiences and great relationships. But you have some bad ones too. You're going to run into that, and it's no different running your own business. You have good ones and bad ones. But I think the thing that people have to understand is you got to recognize who are the good ones and really pay attention to those.
Right.
Because in a lot of cases, you find this in corporate America. I mean, you're a cog in the wheel, right? For the most part, it doesn't matter how good you are. I mean, I had companies that I worked for after I left. People would call me 2 years later, be like, "Man, we really wish you were still here. We're having problems. We wish you could help us." And those are the companies, by the way, that I called when I started my own business and said, "Hey, guess what? I can come help you now. I'm not working for another company." But by the same token, just you got to understand that everybody in corporate America is replaceable to some extent. Right. Whether you're CEO or whether you're an analyst somewhere, everybody is replaceable. We see that a lot now, and so people have to put that in perspective. I think we're changing attitudes. Your job is not necessarily your identity anymore, and I think people are starting to recognize that.
So I think a lot of times we talk about people in our class, at least that are going to branch out on their own. Maybe they're the best mechanic in their mechanic store, right? Or they're in their shop, right? And they can fix cars like crazy. And they decide, I'm going to go open up my own shop. Well, it's going to be a different game now. You're no longer going to be the mechanic. You're now going to be the bookkeeper. You're now going to be the marketing guy. You're now going to be the social media person. You're going to be doing everything to run this business. And maybe fixing cars is not what you're going to be doing. Did you find that to be the case where now you're running a business and there's a whole bucket full of other things that come with that?
It's very true. You are going to be less hands-on than, so in your example, if you're a mechanic and you're fixing cars every day and you really enjoy that, opening up your own shop and saying, this is great, now I can work on cars all day long and I can do it on my own terms, that's probably not going to be the case. You're probably going to work on cars 50% less than you did before because you have all these other things you got to take care of. And so, you have to understand that. I mean, again, it's no different as you rise the ranks in corporate America. If you're somebody that really enjoys being in the middle of things on a day-to-day basis, and you think that you want to go be an executive level, I mean, I'll tell you, when I got to the VP level, it was different. I was solving different problems. I wasn't in the middle of solving supply chain issues necessarily. I was in the middle of solving people issues and relationship issues. So it's different. It's just like that running your business too. You have to focus on different things other than the day-to-day.
Yeah. I mean, I can't remember the last time I threw a dodgeball at one of my camps. It's like I do so many other things to be able to make the camps run,
Yes.
you know, and all of that. But it's like that's just part of it. So I mean, what would you tell the 16-year-old who's sitting in my classroom right now who, you know, wants to go become a computer programmer, but eventually maybe wants to branch out on their own, or, you know, they want to go into any field that's out there, but they think, you know, maybe I'd like to have a side hustle. Maybe I'd like this to be my full-time thing. What advice do you give them?
My biggest piece of advice is, and I heard this a long time ago, and it was something when I was younger that I was like, oh man, I don't want to do that, right? The networking thing is key. You hear it all the time. It's an old cliche, but it's not about what you know, it's who you know. That is super, super important. I would not have been as successful at this if I didn't have a good network to start with.
Yeah.
So starting from your first job out of college, make sure that you're getting out, you're shaking those hands, you're getting FaceTime with people, you're letting them know who you are. You got to do a good job, obviously. But building relationships is key if you ever want to go out on your own.
Yeah.
People will pay attention to you because you work for a certain company or you have a certain position. And once you're no longer with that company or in that position, if you don't have a relationship with them, then they've already moved on. Right. So having those relationships and building that network is super important. And I mean, look, you got to do something that you like too. You can't just go into a profession because I think I'm going to make a ton of money doing it. If you don't like it, you're not going to last long. You've got to like what you do.
What's the hardest thing about being a small business owner or a contractor, or how do you label to yourself? How would you, I think you told me you were, sorry, that's our bell, but you labeled yourself maybe as a contractor. Is that right? Or did you label yourself as a small business owner? I don't know.
I'm a consultant. Yeah, I mean, when people ask me what I do, I tell them I run my own consulting firm. Right?
Consulting firm. That's right. So okay.
I'm the managing partner at a consulting firm. The hardest thing, is that what you asked me?
Yeah.
Yeah. The hardest thing is, you know, the long-term vision is constantly changing. And so making sure you stay on top of that, and you have to adapt. So being adaptable is the hardest part. That and going into a client and understanding that you're not emotionally attached. When I worked for a company, I was emotionally attached. I'd get really, really worked up when people would try to fight me on certain things. You can't do that in my business. I'm very detached emotionally, and I go in and I tell them what I think they need to know. And if they don't want to follow my lead, they don't have to.
What do you mean? Has that happened? They pay you to be a consultant and you go in and you tell them and they're like, that guy doesn't know what he's talking about.
Yeah, the guys in leadership generally are on board, but you'll have some of the folks that are, you know, levels down from that are like, yeah, they'll fight you tooth and nail because they just want to do it their way. And some of them feel threatened. They think that it means they're not doing their job, which isn't the case. We're just giving them new and different ideas that they should try out. But again, I would say you can lead the horse to water. In my business, that's very, very true. I can't make them drink. And if they don't, I say, okay, I gave you the advice that you wanted. If you don't take it, then that's on you. And I'm happy to take my pay from you and off I go to the next one, right? That's kind of the nature of the business.
Is the best thing about being a consultant that you could go see a movie at 9 a.m. or you could go have lunch with every day, or is it just the freedom? Is that a big part of it?
There's freedom, but there's a balance there, right? I mean, there's plenty of evenings where, you know, I have a wife and kids, and there's plenty of evenings where they're like, oh my gosh, are you still working? It's like, yeah, I gotta get something done. I have to have this done for tomorrow morning. So that doesn't stop. Don't think that like, you know, I get to roll out of bed at 10 a.m. and like
watching Judge Judy, you're watching Price is Right every morning.
I probably watch less TV now than I ever did, because again, when you do your own business, you think about it a lot. I mean, I find myself, even when I am spending time doing other things, like you're like, oh man, I got to remember that. And I'll like have to jot something down on my phone. Like when you really are in your business, you're constantly thinking about it. And so there is no time clock. It never stops.
Well, man, Chris, this has been fantastic. I appreciate you coming in and talking with us today. I'd love to revisit with you again next year about this, and maybe just, you know, follow up and see how you're doing and new challenges that you're facing, all that stuff. Thanks so much for coming in today.
Yeah, happy to be here. Hope it was helpful, and appreciate it.